Sometimes in a relationship, the dynamic can feel kind of off. And oftentimes this seeming imbalance in power in the relationship can lead to us feeling like we're being a walkover. The truth is that this habit of always saying yes, of accepting everything on behalf of the relationship to please your partner, can actually lead to a worsening relationship dynamic over time. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how not to be a walkover in your relationship, where this people-pleasing habit comes from, and how to start to change the dynamic of the relationship healthily over time. You may have heard of this people-pleasing. None of us like to think that we're people-pleasing, but people-pleasing tendencies, especially in relationships, can appear in maybe not so obvious ways. At its core, people-pleasing in a relationship is the habit of saying yes, of avoiding conflict, or hiding your real feelings to keep the other person happy. Oftentimes this can be out of fear of rejection, of guilt, or habit, but ultimately it comes down to sacrificing your own needs, overgiving, or just agreeing to things in order to keep the peace. Now, I want to be really clear, people-pleasing isn't true kindness. It's not true generosity or real compromise, because all of those come from choice and authenticity, not from fear. Real kindness honors both people's needs, while people-pleasing creates an imbalance by meeting the other person's needs at the expense of your own. And this people-pleasing role that gets taken on is terrible for both parties within the relationship. For the people-pleaser, you get a short-term win. It feels good, but it creates a fragility. So you may get approval in the moment. It feels safe temporarily. So in the moment, as the people-pleaser, you can feel useful or valued because you're needed in that moment. So it keeps the peace in that moment, which reduces your immediate anxiety, but it's the long-term impact. Over time, when you're falling for this people-pleasing yes man illusion, it builds resentment because your own needs are ignored. You lose your sense of self, your values, your desires, and your boundaries start to get blurry. And this leads to a higher risk of burnout, of emotional exhaustion, or even depression. And this creates an uneven dynamic where the people pleaser can become the caretaker or the fixer, not an equal partner within the relationship. And this especially can happen in ADHD relationships. I've spoken about this caregiver role a bit more in depth, which I'll link to up above and in the description down below. But this people pleasing also is terrible for the person being pleased. I don't have a technical name for them, but the other person in the relationship. On the short term, it feels comfortable, but it's shallow. So they get their way often. They feel supported, they feel cared for, or even powerful. They feel good in that moment in the short term. They experience fewer conflicts, arguments, less tension in that moment. And it may feel to them in the moment that you are easygoing or agreeable, and it may feel good. But over the long term, it has a massive impact because it breaks down trust. They start to distrust or doubt your honesty, because when you're saying yes to things, but internally you're not agreeing to it, you're not liking it, you're building up resentment, then they start to question, are you actually telling me the truth, or are you just telling me what I want to hear? They don't get to know the real you because you're holding your opinion back. You're not ever pushing back in a healthy way. We'll talk about that in a second. You're not really giving any of your real self, and this blocks any sort of real intimacy. And then later on, they may even feel guilty or manipulated if they realize that the person who is people-pleasing was silently unhappy. And over time, it risks creating this massive imbalance in the relationship. And this weakens intellectual intimacy within the relationship. This is respect and growth. And then when resentment finally surfaces from the person who's doing the people-pleasing, it can feel really sudden or explosive, because how are they supposed to know that you weren't happy about it if you weren't talking about it? So it can feel like it came out of nowhere. So it really breaks down the trust in a relationship. So how do you stop people-pleasing in a relationship? So the very first step in this is to name the driver. If you are a people-pleaser, usually it comes from a specific place. So usually at its core, people-pleasing, saying yes to everything, avoiding conflict, usually comes from fear of rejection, of conflict, of being unloved, whatever it is. But it can also come from habit, something that you've always done and never really questioned it. So it's really important to take the time to dig into that, to find out Why do I always say yes? Why do I never really push back? Why do I never challenge anything that's being said to me? Why do I always take on things even when I don't feel like it's necessary or fair? But when your partner approaches you with specific asks or tasks or assumptions that you're going to do something, before you answer that, before you give any sort of answer, before you say yes, pause and ask yourself, am I saying yes because I actually want to? Or is it because I'm scared of a fight? Or is it because I'm on autopilot? The next is to relearn how to decide what actions you take, what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. Now, a lot of people think that deciding to do something is saying yes to something, but that's not the case. Deciding to do something is saying no to all the other options. Whatever you're saying yes to doing it, you're saying no to the other options during that time. So if your partner is saying, hey, can you take out the trash? When you're saying yes to it, you're saying no to doing other stuff during that time. The more you're saying yes to things, the more you're saying no to a lot of other options. And this is where it becomes an energy management issue. Saying yes to avoid an argument, to keep the peace, to be a good partner without actually being deliberate with it, means that you're not managing your energy properly. We all only have a certain amount of energy within the day. And if you're just saying yes, just to keep the peace, then what that means is that you're starting a journey without checking how much fuel you have in the tank. And that's bad for everyone. So when you're deciding to do things, it's not just about saying yes to things. It's about the fact that you're saying no to a lot of other things. There are things that you can't do whilst you're doing that thing. So ask yourself, do you have the space for that? But the main step is to stop making decisions in the moment. Instead, choosing to make a decision by a deadline. So when you're being asked to do something, when you're talking about what to do, rather than just saying, here's what I'm going to do, actually take the time to process it, to look at your calendar, to look at your energy levels, and look at all of the factors that involve in making a decision, but not making a decision then and there. Coming up with a deadline as to when you're going to make a decision. This means that you think about it with urgency. So you're acknowledging that it's important to think about, but you're not thinking about it and making a decision with impulsivity. This then means that you ask better questions. So not saying yes to something in the moment, but actually taking the time to process it. And one practical thing that you can do for this is to start to practice for conversation. Our own people-pleasing habits start to collapse when we don't have any response ready. So take your own time to practice how to pause and defer a conversation. For example, if your partner says, hey, can you do the kitchen this weekend? Rather than saying yes, making a promise and then letting someone down because you don't do it or you can't do it or you're doing it with resentment, you can say something along the lines of, I totally get that this is important to do and I totally feel the same way. Sometimes I can rush into just saying yes without thinking about it, and I don't want to do that anymore. So I really want to take the time to look at my calendar, just double check everything before I jump in and say yes. Is it okay if I just think about it, check it out, and get back to you by tonight? This means that you're able to take the time to process it, to look at all of the factors, your energy, your time management. You're acknowledging that it's an important decision and you're giving yourself a deadline to decide. This means that you're able to ask better questions, you're able to come up with better alternatives and make a stronger decision that may be better for the big picture. Then it's important to go away, process all of the pros and cons yourself before coming up with your potential solution. So this may be the exact solution that is being presented to you, but it may not be. There may be some tweaks that you can discuss, and in going away and thinking about it and processing everything, it means that you're able to show some leadership in the situation, weigh all the pros and cons, and be able to come back with a potentially stronger suggestion. When you're going away and you're processing all of this, it's really important to consider three main elements. The first is, what is the other person, your partner, what is their personal goal in this situation? Then it's also important to think about, what is your personal goal? You are two individuals with different personal goals and values, and that's okay. But it's important to consider both. But then it's important to consider what is the joint relationship goal as well. In this way, when you're looking at whether you're agreeing to do something or not, you're weighing up everything. You're treating everything equally, both your personal goal, your partner's personal goal, and the joint goals of the relationship as well. This means that you're able to look at everything equally and be able to make a much better decision as to whether you say yes or not. And it's really important that when you return to this conversation, to approach the conversation with your best formed hypothesis. So this means that as you weigh the pros and cons and all of the factors that influence this, it means that you are forming your best judgment. But this doesn't mean that you necessarily have all of the information. So formulate your hypothesis like a scientist, but don't be rigid in that. Don't be so stuck to your hypothesis that's the only option. Be open to changing position based on new information, or based on all three factors in the conversation. So again, this doesn't mean that you have to agree to it, but looking at it as still a collaborative effort is going to be really, really important. And then as you're talking about these things with your partner, think of the win-win. Work towards a solution that works for both parties and the relationship. Now, a lot of people see these situations as win-lose. My partner suggested something, so either I say yes to it or things go to shit. They see it as a zero-sum game, one winner, one loser, which means that they win and I lose, or I win and they lose. But the more that you dig into conversations, the more that you stop avoiding conflict and have the challenging conversations and do it in a collaborative way, this means you will always get closer to a win-win where you both win. This is where the relationship wins. What this does is it means that you're involving your partner in this process. You're not just simply agreeing to something and then feeling resentment. You're actually taking the time to collaborate with your partner as to what is the best option for everyone. How does everyone win in this scenario? And again, this stops this from being this impulsive decision and actually a fully processed, thought through decision that takes in all the factors. And this breaks this people-pleasing cycle because it stops the automatic assumption that you will say yes and builds a process for you both to be involved in this. Now, obviously, there's only so much that I can jump into in a YouTube video, but if you do want a deeper dive on all of this, on the fundamentals of relationships and how to build back this, what we call intellectual intimacy, then join my relationship bootcamp, where you'll learn the same fundamental core steps to start rebuilding your relationship back from the ground up. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to grab your spot. So once you start changing this dynamic, your partner may push back. That doesn't mean that you're wrong, and it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means that things are changing. And this is something that's going to happen with any change in relationship dynamic. When you're breaking this cycle, this can cause some escalation. And this is what people usually try to avoid. When you've been in this people-pleasing cycle for a long time, so it's really important to understand how to de-escalate conversations in order to start rebuilding the dynamic towards a more collaborative dynamic. Now, I've done a much deeper dive video on this, on how to de-escalate situations, which I'll link to up on the screen and in the description down below. But it's really important as you're getting out of this people-pleasing habit to rebuild back a much more equitable dynamic that you learn how to de-escalate situations without it turning into an argument. De-escalating a situation doesn't mean walking away. It doesn't mean people-pleasing and folding. It actually is about leaning in to the discomfort of a conflict, but still getting to a healthy point. And this is going to be really crucial for stepping out of this people-pleasing role and into a much more healthy, equitable relationship for both of you. So I'm going to leave you with that deep dive video on de-escalation, and I'll see you over there.